So greetings once again from Pennsylvania, and we're back in a familiar spot. Back behind me there is the Tulpehocken Trinity Reformed Church, or sometimes called Christ Tulpehocken Church, I think. It goes by different names throughout history, but I have ancestors buried here. One of them is a Revolutionary War veteran, Franz Paul Zeller. I know I mentioned him in my most recent video in this series. I think the video was about the Hanover Resolves. Let me show you around quick. You might recognize this place. Yeah, but it's a beautiful spot. Franz Paul is down that way, but this is the old cemetery. There is a newer one across the way. We're going to be focusing on this one here. Numerous flags out here. Most of the ones out here are Revolutionary War veterans, a few Civil War veterans. And in that video on the Hanover Resolves, I think I mentioned him, Franz Paul Zeller, and I could have had trouble finding information about him, where he served and things like that. Several of you reached out in the comments section. I think one person mentioned that you served under Captain John Lesher, but that comment disappeared. I'm not sure what happened to it. Someone else mentioned a Michael Zeller. I'll get back to both those comments, so thank you for that. But that name Lesher sounded familiar, so I dug way back into my really old notes. I started researching my family history back in college. I have notes back from like 2000, but the internet wasn't the same as it is today. But through those notes, I did find a piece of paper where I had written down Captain John Lesher, and that my ancestor Franz Paul Zeller had served under him in his company. So I guess I kind of did know that, but I forgot about it. But anyway, I found a ton more information about it since then, obviously, because there's more online than there was back in like 2000. So let's find Franz Paul. I know he's right up here. We'll talk a little about where he served. Yeah, so this is a video. It's a family history series video. This is also part of my Revolutionary War series. So kind of two series in one. All right, let's go find them. I might take a look at some of the other veterans as we make our way down there, because there are a number of other veterans buried here. Most of them have names that'll be difficult to read. Yeah, but here he is, Franz Paul Zeller. It says the original older tombstone, but it has the newer marker down here, which I like because they're usually easier to read. Franz Paul Zeller, yeah, 1751 to 1821, Revolutionary War Sergeant, PA Militia, Berks County, 1776 to 1782. There's his wife, Elizabeth, buried over there. So cool. I think we'll find some spot in the shade to talk about him, where he served and what he did. A couple more veterans down this way too. Every flag you see is a veteran out here. Probably a lot of them my ancestor fought with, either in his company or, you know, similar ones. So he probably knew any number of these men, fought with them, served with them. That's kind of just an interesting thought. I thought of that earlier today when I was visiting another cemetery. I'll talk about that later. Yeah, wow. A lot of names are virtually illegible on these tombstones, though. Yeah, so I found a nice shaded spot under this giant sycamore tree. Kind of a cool spot. It's gonna be hot today, maybe 90 degrees. Might be our first 90-degree day here this spring. I guess it's still spring. Today's June 4th. But yeah, it was cool. Last night I was online just researching a bunch of stuff again, you know, typing in different names and stuff. I just love doing that. But yeah, he did attain the rank of sergeant. So he served in it gets kind of confusing, you know, because these companies, you know, they change names, they change battalions and stuff like that. But he served in originally it looks like it's the Colonel Patton's battalion in August 27th of 1766. It was the first company, and captain was John Lesher. So later in this video, I'll show you. I went looking for John Lesher for his marker, which he said was over here in Stouchburg, which is just over that way a little ways. I went looking for it, but I couldn't find it. But I'll show that footage later. Yeah, the first lieutenant was Jacob Ruhr. Second lieutenant was John Ansbach. Ensign was Jacob Borner, and the fifer was Andrew Zeller. That's cool. The fifer. I guess that's the person who played the fife. I guess that's what you call it, or I don't know which one it is. I'm not a musical person. But yeah, guess who Andrew Zeller is? That was Franz Paul's brother. So that's interesting. So that would be my great uncle was a fifer in the Revolutionary War. That's cool. Yeah, I just checked that term up. I was pretty sure it was a musical instrument. I'm thinking maybe that's something else. But yeah, I did not inherit any of that musical ability. But as long as she's a fifer, it wasn't just for music, for like entertainment. Sometimes it was for signaling the men to do certain movements and stuff. So that's cool. It wasn't just for entertainment. So a fifer. But yeah, like I said, I didn't inherit any of that music. But yeah, and one of you mentioned like in the comments a Michael Zeller. That was most likely Franz Paul's brother as well. He had a Michael, and he served in another battalion under Captain Peter Decker was the name. He was in the 5th PA battalion. So a great grandfather and several great uncles that all served in the Revolutionary War. That's kind of cool, actually. And the company did change hands a number of times. I have different notes written down. Seems like under Patton in up to May of '77, they were part of the 4th Virginia Regiment, which is kind of interesting. During what's called the Philadelphia campaign. Prior to that, in '76, he was involved in the Jersey campaign. I'll explain what both of those are in a minute. But then the company was reassigned elsewhere. Eventually, in '79, it became part of the 11th PA Regiment. So I think that happened a lot, where it just kind of changes hands quite a few times. So I recognize another name, another tombstone I found later in this video, a Colonel Henry Spiker, when it was part of the 6th Battalion. So yeah, this is later as part of the 2nd Battalion in 1780. So like I said, just changed names quite a few times. But I think that's the way it works in the military. Maybe especially back then when they're just totally creating the Continental Army out of nothing, basically, and constantly reorganize companies and regiments and battalions, all that fun stuff. But yeah, let's talk a little bit about the Jersey campaign and the Pennsylvania campaign. So I'm pretty sure my Franz Paul and his 2 brothers probably served in both those. I don't know how long. I think I said his plaque there said till 1782. So that's interesting. So I might just talk a little about what those campaigns were. Yeah, so the Jersey campaign started in July 3rd of 1776. So basically right away, and it lasted until about January 3rd of 1777. So it was a battle for control of New York City, the harbor there, the Hudson River, and New Jersey. There's mixed results with that. The British were able to take the New York harbor and Long Island, but they were not able to take control of New Jersey at that time. But then after that came the Philadelphia campaign in the fall of 1777. The British did take control of Philadelphia, but they did retreat. Later in '78, they had to let it go for different reasons, which I'll get to later in this series on the Revolutionary War. But yeah, in the Philadelphia campaign, we'll talk about a lot about. There's the Battle of Brandywine, the Battle of Germantown. It's interesting too. I just think about these different battles I've heard of, like when Washington crossed the Delaware River. That famous scene. My ancestors could have been part of that. Franz Paul he was part of that. That's part of the Jersey, the Philadelphia campaign. He might have been one of those people that crossed the Delaware River that night. I never really considered that prior to this, but he was part of that. That's fascinating. Can't say for sure that he was involved in it, but it's likely. And then, because after the Philadelphia campaign, they overwintered at Valley Forge, which is more than likely where he stayed too. So it just makes places like that all the more personal. I mean, they're part of our history. I love history. That's cool, blah, blah, blah. But to find out that one of your ancestors also was a part of those things, that's makes it more personal. So, like I said, it's hard to know for sure about some of those things, but he was, the company he fought for was part of those, those battalions and whatever you want to call it, all those military terms. He was part of that. So, yeah. And I did go looking for Captain John Lesher's tombstone. Actually, he attained the rank of a major later on. They said he was buried over there in Stouchburg at the Christ Evangelical Cemetery. I couldn't find him there. That doesn't mean he's not there. Some of those tombstones are difficult to read, and I don't know. Sometimes not everything you find on the internet is true, folks. So I'll share that footage with you now. I stopped in there and then I quick stopped in at another nearby cemetery, Reed's, just to see if it was there. So I'll share that footage now. All right, so here we are at the Christ Evangelical Lutheran Church. We're going to see if we can find John Lesher here. We've been at this cemetery a number of times before. This is the old cemetery. There is a new one over that way, but let's see. He should have a flag by his name. Like, here's another veteran, George Groff. He died in 1778, so he probably died during the war. 1715 to 78. Number of Revolutionary War flags down there. This is the graveyard with a number of really cool tombstones. I think we filmed here before a number of times. Yeah, so Lesher was not an ancestor of mine, but it'd still be cool to find him because my ancestor, my great-great-great-great-grandfather, served under him, so it'd be kind of interesting, maybe just to find, since it's right nearby. Yeah, but unfortunately, some of these are almost unreadable. So yeah, but we'll keep looking. Don't have to find it, just be kind of cool to do so. All right, I'll get back to you. Here's a Frederick Deck. Private First Company, PA Militia, Revolutionary War. That was a little more readable. That's what I was hoping that Lesher's would be. Like, he achieved the rank of a major. I thought maybe he would have a nicer marker. I'm seeing some of these down here are Civil War vets. We're getting to a slightly newer compared to up here. So yeah. Not seen his yet. Alright, well, I'm not seeing him. Even if you can't read the full marker, like some of these are pretty difficult to read, you can still kind of tell that the name doesn't say, you know, John Lesher on it, so. But there's a number of like unmarked graves here, so. I mean, I suppose the church does have records, but anyway, I'm gonna let that go for now. He was not the primary objective of this video, but I thought since we're in the area, we'd go look for him. I might backtrack and go to another cemetery here in Stouchburg, Reed's Cemetery. I know my notes said this one, but online information is iffy sometimes, so I might just quick check that one. It's just over that way. I have family buried at that one too, and this one. So, all right, I might just quick check there. Yeah, so this is Reed's Cemetery now. I'm just going to quick take a look. See a lot of Civil War markers, but the oldies are down that way, so let's head down there. Take a quick look. Well, here's a Major Michael Furry, Pennsylvania. He served under Colonel Spiker. I've seen that name on research. 6th Pennsylvania Militia, Revolutionary War. So cool. My ancestor might have served with him at some point. Actually, probably with a lot of these. There's a lot of veterans here too. Alright, but I'm not really finding him in here either. This is just kind of a shot in the dark too. But all these Revolutionary War flags, probably France Paul, my great-great-great-grandfather, he probably served with some of these men too. In his company and other companies, you know, under the same regiment or battalion. It's interesting to think, though. Anyway, so there's still a connection with a lot of these men that I have, you know, through my ancestry in different ways like that. That's cool. All right. Yeah, so like I said, I couldn't find him, but doesn't mean he's not there. I figured he'd have a more, like France Paul has that little more newer monument down below too, which is easier to read. I thought Lesher would have that too, but anyway. But yeah, it's like in that, when I was filming out there, that's when I realized, when I'm looking at all these other Revolutionary War markers, that these are all men that my ancestor, my great-great-grandfather, he probably served with many of these men. Maybe not even just in his company, but in the similar regiment or battalions, things like that. Served with them, fought with them. He probably knew some of them, some of his friends. And then, like I said earlier in this video, earlier when I was here at this cemetery, just walking around looking at the markers, I realized, just thinking that same thing. That was just a new thought. Wow. These were his comrades in arms. You know, maybe some of them were his friends, and maybe he didn't get along with some of them. That's the way it is. But yeah, you know, men like these right here. There's 1, 2, 3 veterans over here. There's 3 more. You know, who were these men? You know, did Franz Paul? Did he know these men? You know, well, like I said, I assume he did. You know, what was his relationship with them? Just kind of wonder what the stories are. You know, was that his best friend? You know, did that guy save his life, or did he, you know, did he help save the life of someone else? Did he, you know, fight side by side with one of these men, you know, in the Battle of Trenton? You know, did he stay, you know, overwinter in Valley Forge with, you know, one of those men up there? You know, one of those cabins where it's so cold. You know, just kind of wonder. And I just wonder too if Franz Paul Zeller, if he ever wrote down his experience, if he ever kept a journal, you know, if it still exists, that'd be cool. You know, who knows? It'd be cool if he had a more detailed history of his service. But I don't know that anything like that exists. That'd be fascinating to read. Because other than that, I don't really know a whole lot about what he did. Like I can kind of guess, since he was part of those companies and part of those campaigns, I can guess and kind of assume the battles that he fought in and the campaigns that he served in, but that's the best you can do. But still interesting though. Alright, as I mentioned earlier, it'll make some of those videos to me a little bit more personal. And we go back to Valley Forge, when we're going back and film, you know, the crossing of the Delaware, some of those other battles, you know, to realize that he more than likely fought in those battles, along with, you know, so many other men also buried in this cemetery, and the 2 others I visited today too. Yes, this was a fun video for me to make. I love researching my family history, especially when it includes like really old history like this. Just realizing too that, like, I've been to, you know, the Washington Crossing State Park, I've been to Valley Forge, and not just realizing that, because I never realized that before. I never put the 2 together. I never really realized where he served before, when and where. I knew he was in the Revolutionary War, but I didn't know much in the way of details, but now I know a lot more, and it's just, yeah, it's gonna make those videos a lot more interesting to me to film. But hey, you know, thank you for those who did a little research too and left comments for me. If you want to research more, I appreciate it, go for it. But yeah, I'll definitely be researching more myself. There's only so much you can learn on the internet too. So yeah, all right, awesome history. But thanks for coming along, folks, and hopefully we'll see you on the next one.